And good afternoon. Once again, I'm Nate Boswell. I'm Assistant Dean for Continuing Studies. Thank you for joining us today for Discover Stanford for You. We're excited to bring you this event, which is being co-sponsored by Stanford Continuing Studies and by Stanford's Office of External Relations, and features two renowned Stanford researchers, Victor Lee and Denise Pope. After opening remarks from Dan Schwarz, the Dean and Faculty Director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning at the Stanford Graduate School of Education, Dr. Lee and Dr. Pope will discuss the dynamic relationship between AI and education. With about 15 to 20 minutes left in the hour, we'll field questions from the audience and we'll prompt you to submit questions before via the Q&A Zoom function. You can do that at any time during the program. The program will close with comments from Megan Sweezy-Fogarty, Senior Associate Vice President for Community Engagement. And to kick us off, I'm now going to turn it to Dan Schwarz, who, as I said, is the Dean and Faculty Director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. Welcome, Dan, and now we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Nate. And thank you, everyone, for coming. We've known AI was eventually going to make it to education. But nobody predicted how fast it would show up once it broke through. This is very exciting from the perspective of the Graduate School of Education. This is kind of a great thing because it's forcing new questions. People always have lots of assumptions about what education should be and is, and suddenly this showed up in all new questions. And so there's getting a lot of attention to education, which is good. And one example of the energy around this is the accelerator put out a seed grant, which means faculty, staff, students can compete for money to study, develop AI in education. And this grant had more applicants of any other seed grant that's happened at Stanford, as far as I know. We got several proposals, multiple proposals from every one of the schools, except for the law school, which surprised me because these new tools are going to have a big impact. So this is very exciting. It raises fundamental questions about what students need to learn and how do we go about teaching them. At the same time, there is a concern on my part, at least, which is AI could make us very efficient at what we're currently doing, and some of which isn't necessarily great, right? So AI is based on the past to some extent. And so it could get good at automating the past, and we may not want to just replicate. So my hope, right, is that the presence of AI will lead to new innovations, to better ways of teaching, to providing feedback, to helping people discover and achieve their dreams. And I think this is a place where a university can do special work because we have the space to really think about things and try out new things without tremendous market forces pushing us. So today you get to hear from two of my favorite colleagues, Denise Pope and Victor Lee, and they'll tell you what's going on out there. So Denise is a senior lecturer at the Stanford Graduate School of Education and the co-founder of Challenge Success, which is a Stanford-affiliated nonprofit that works with schools and parents to improve the students' well-being, their engagement, and their sense of belonging. Importantly, maybe most important to me, is she is my co-host. She's actually the star, but I call her my co-host on the podcast Schools In, which discusses the research behind current issues in education. The other speaker is Victor Lee. He's a professor at the Graduate School of Education, and his scholarship focuses on studying and designing learning experiences and resources for data literacy, for K-12 data science education, and for artificial intelligence literacy. And importantly, he leads our initiative in generative AI at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. So Victor and Denise recently collaborated on research that was exploring what students and teachers are doing with tools like ChatGPT. And now you're going to get a chance to learn more about that work today. So Victor and Denise, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that intro. Victor is sharing his slides. I know some people are still coming in. So welcome to those of you who are still coming in. It's a big group, so it takes a while for folks to to get here. But I will turn it over to Victor to start us off.
Thanks. And Denise, do me a favor as you always do, and everything's looking okay with Zoom. We always like to check.
Everything is looking good.
Excellent. Well, that's already a flavor for how Denise and I interact. We're really excited to have you join us and while we talk about the intersection of AI and education. And in preparing for this, Denise and I had some conversations. We wanted this to feel lively. We wanted to be informative, but lively. First, we talked about, oh, maybe we could do this like a podcast, but it turns out that Dan and Denise already have a podcast, so we couldn't do that. I suggested that we do something like Hot Ones, that YouTube show where you take turns eating really spicy chicken wings and answer like more and more revealing questions. But ever since the one chip challenge, I think the university put the kibosh on that. So we are not going to be enjoying chicken wings, but we do want to keep this really conversational. We wanted to really speak to a lot of things that we hear repeatedly in hallway conversations or at talks or presentations. And so what we're going to be doing is sharing things that we hear and what we here at Stanford have to say on that particular matter. So to illustrate, Denise, if you don't mind.
Yes. So, Victor, we hear a lot of different ways of referring to AI. Some people just say AI, some people say ChatGPT, some people say LLM, which stands for large language model. And I know those are not all the same, right? So walk us through. I think this is going to be a good lesson for folks out there who don't know the differences.
Sure. And I can completely understand. You've been hearing a lot of letters like GPT, AI, LLM, and it's getting really confusing as to what all those terms refer to. So I'm going to just share very quickly a short primer that people told me have been really helpful for them. So first off, GPT. GPT is everywhere. It's three letters that we didn't really think would be put together, and not everybody knows what they stand for. But it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Now, nobody's going to be quizzed on that or need to remember that. It's completely fine to just say the letters GPT. But what is that exactly? And how does that relate to all this AI and ChatGPT and LLMs and such? Well, we know the internet is full of text. There's Wikipedia and there's blog posts and news articles and many things that are on there, huge amounts of it. And so what we've been able to do over recent years has been to use large amounts of that text as training, so as input into a mathematical system that we would call a neural network. And that basically does mathematical calculations that helps to determine what words would tend to occur a lot with other words. And that we would then refer to that sort of network that has been trained and knows what are the probabilities for those as a large language model, so an LLM. And the LLM that has gotten a lot of attention, and if any of you've tried ChatGPT, the free version will use what's called GPT 3.5. And so that's basically the fancy name for the very specific large language model that ChatGPT uses. Now, if you pay to use ChatGPT, then you may have access to GPT 4.0. So that's just like hearing, oh, I use OS 10.6, but now it's going up to OS 10.7. So it's the same sort of a thing where it's the underlying guts of it. But to make the distinction here, ChatGPT is effectively what we'd call an AI chatbot. So think about this like a car. The large language model, in this case, GPT 3.5, is the engine. But the car itself is the chatbot. So ChatGPT is a very specific model of car, and it runs on and is powered by this GPT 3.5 engine. But, it has all these different features on it, like, oh, it's going to appear through a browser window. And if you ask it if it's human, it's going to tell you it's not human. If you ask it things that are from recent history, it'll say, sorry, I only was trained on stuff prior to the year 2021. So it has a bunch of different rules that a program would be expected and part of how it's supposed to function and appear. So that way, when you interact with that chatbot, which runs this underlying large language model, in this case, GPT 3.5, unless you're paying for access to GPT 4.0, you get these sorts of chat interactions that you see down here. Now, obviously, a lot of other companies have taken notice. And so you see a very similar sort of a thing happening, but what's different? So like Google, for example, has launched Bard. And you can see here, they have their own neural network, which is going to be very similar in terms of like what's the kinds of mathematics that gets done with it and how it's structured, but it's proprietary. And they might have used a different slice of text to work with. Huge slice for sure. And their large language model was called Palm. Palm 2 for the particular version that they've been most recently using. And then the chatbot, so being the card that runs on the Palm 2 engine, would be Bard. And so how Bard works then is, okay, well, it should also appear like a chat window. It should integrate with Google services specifically. One thing you may have noticed if you played with Google Bard is that you can view multiple response options, or the options all appear at once instead of looking like it's being typed out there. So those are some of the ways in which those chatbots are programmed and structured to be different. They both run on large language models, although they may use different branded large language models. And this is all part of artificial intelligence. Now, what makes this really confusing is that, ChatGPT has taken the spotlight. It's gotten a lot of attention. But AI includes a lot more than ChatGPT, and it's been here for quite a while. It includes lots of technologies that we've already used and gotten familiar with, such as voice recognition, if you use an Alexa device or a Siri device at home, image recognition, which could be on the Face ID to unlock your phones, or to have photos of your friends or family members auto-labeled and detected. Recommendations, knowing sort of what would be good advertisements for particular customers or customer groups or other products that you might enjoy because similar people have bought those would also be a form of AI. Car navigation and finding directions have long been an AI search problem, which also then ties into other search. Search is also AI, and that's been around for as long as we've been using Google as a verb. And language translation and many other things. So when we talk about AI, there's a lot more than ChatGPT per se, but ChatGPT and Bard and all of these other chatbot type technologies and image generator technologies that can sort of make a fake image of Taylor Swift at a Houston Texans game, for instance, rather than the Kansas City Chiefs game. Those are generative AI, and that's the new genre that everyone's paying attention to right now, because that can create new content and can create things that we've not seen before, whereas these other things would detect existing patterns and sort of help us know which pattern to detect in there. So, no one's going to be quizzed on this per se, but it's really confusing with all these letters coming out. But AI is a bit different and bigger than ChatGPT, which is bigger and relies upon things like a large language model or LLM. Does that help, Denise?
Super helpful. I know that was a little bit long, but I said to Victor, no, we have to do this. It's super, super helpful. People do not just know that stuff. So thank you.
Okay, well, let me tell you something I'm hearing a lot,
Yeah.
especially in the Silicon Valley. And they're just saying everyone is using ChatGPT now. Everyone. So Denise, is everyone using ChatGPT?
It's like something you hear from your teenager, right? Everyone is going to the party. I have to go to the party. Everyone's using ChatGPT. I have to use ChatGPT. Well, the answer is not so much. So Challenge Success, as you know, Dan did a very nice intro of us, is a nonprofit affiliated with the School of Education that I co-founded. And we were in the right position at the right time to do some data collection. And in the spring of 2023, which was pretty much, ChatGPT came out November 2022. So we were catching it just right at this past couple of months. We were asking a bunch of students, and this is students at some different high schools, if they knew what it was and if they've used it. We did some other stuff that I'm going to talk about in a minute too. But you can see right here, I don't know what that is, about 9%. I have not used one, 38%, and I have used one, 53%. Then we decided to go and collect more data in the fall of 2023 to say, well, maybe that was like a little bit on the early side, and that's why they didn't know about it so much, or what were the numbers like now? And now we've got a bigger N, right? About 10,000 student responses, high school. I don't know what that is. About 7% have not used one, 54% have used one, 39%. And so you could see, like, the answer is no, not everybody's using it. There's a good chunk, about half, that really aren't using it. In fact, a comparison to some Pew data, which is outside of Stanford, from fall 2023, 32% hadn't even heard of it. So you can see that even our responses with those particular high schools are a particular niche where a lot more students have heard of it, whereas the national sample from Pew, a larger percentage hadn't even heard of it. Yeah. So here's the thing. It caused, even though we have these numbers, you'd have about half using it, in this case, 40% using it. We're hearing that there's a cheating crisis going on, and we're hearing it in the media. You might have heard inklings of this. School systems were banning ChatGPT because of the fear of cheating. So Victor, fill us in. What, is this really a crisis? Should we be wringing our hands?
Well, I can appreciate that a lot of people are wringing their hands. I do a lot of work directly with teachers and superintendents, and this is like the number one thing that they're asking about. And I can completely understand. So if you spend time with ChatGPT, you can ask it to write a sonnet, you can ask it to write a play, you can ask it to write an essay comparing, the virtues of the Enlightenment. And so that's quite impressive. It's not the sort of thing that AI had been able to do in the past. And we're seeing all these news stories, and these are legitimate news stories about AI having been used when it should not have been, as particularly for these writing assignments. And you can talk with various people, and there are certainly instances of people who have been using AI in situations where that is not really where we expected AI to be used. A lot of these, when you read them, are appearing at the college level. But, given what we see is possible, and you had mentioned, what is it, the way the teens say it? So I'm going to try to channel my inner teen using this popular meme. We're kind of afraid that students are going to be very tempted to go off and favor ChatGPT instead of actually doing some of the writing that we're asking them to do as part of their classroom assignments. But Denise, I think that you can tell us a little bit about some of the additional work that we've been doing, thanks to Challenge Success being in the right place and at the right time.
Yeah, so Victor and I paired up together. We're a pretty powerful duo because we had all the access to schools and the surveys, and we've been asking about academic integrity along with well-being and belonging and engagement for years. And so we were, again, at the right place at the right time, paired up with Victor to then add some AI questions, but we could still keep that same question about, we had about 15 different behaviors that we ask about, copying from someone's paper with their knowledge, copying without their knowledge, staying home on the day of a test to get more, time to study. And all of these behaviors can be considered different forms of academic integrity violations depending on who you are and how you look at it. So we had 3 high schools that we actually could compare, and these are from the West and Midwest: a private all-girls high school, a public high school, and a charter high school. Those 2 were co-ed. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about what we found when we compared what those answers were on those academic integrity questions pre-ChatGPT and then post-ChatGPT. So you can look, we decided to use 2019 only because I think you'll remember there's this little thing called COVID that happened in 2020 and even 2021. People still weren't quite back to their usual. I mean, some people would say we're still not back to usual. But we had good data from these 3 high schools from the academic integrity questions on 2019, and we compared it, and you can see all 3 took it again in 2023. We also had 2 of them take it in 2022. So we had that data, and we asked, how often have you engaged in the following behaviors in the past month? And we asked all those questions. And if you look at sort of the overall percentages, there really wasn't that much of a difference. So here's a good news, bad news situation, right? These are the percentages of cheating. They're kind of high, right? And even the private high school, the lowest we see is 60 up to over 80% in 2019. So there was a lot of cheating going on before anything called ChatGPT was being used in schools. That should be a little bit of a red flag for people. Now, if you fast forward and look at 2022 and 2023, the numbers did not go up drastically. They also did not go down drastically. In some cases, a little bit. So we came to the conclusion that pretty much ChatGPT did not open the floodgates to huge amounts of excess cheating based on what we'd seen in 2019. And Victor, you have even some more data to show on that.
Yes, and just to remember, it was November of 2022 when ChatGPT went viral. So that we only had like the tail end of 2022. 2023 has just ended. Well, when you were talking about cheating, you were saying, oh, copying from someone else's test or staying home and getting extra time. And I had to say, like, that's not what my biggest concern is with AI or something like ChatGPT or chatbot technology. It's that they're going to copy and paste online content that they generate. And so when we looked at those specific behaviors, and this is just within one school, but representative of others in there, it's also staying the same. So it's turning out that the students are not really that compelled in large numbers to shift that particular cheating behavior. Although there is definitely an interesting question about, what can we do to promote a school culture of academic integrity writ large? And I know that this finding was surprising, surprising enough because the New York Times contacted us to share this. And I don't photograph well, but we're really happy to tell them about this work.
You look great. Come on, you look great.
But it has been getting word out there, and we're actually seeing they looked at some other sources too, and we're seeing a pretty consistent pattern early on that it's still not unleashing some new floodgates. So that's been interesting. But I'm not going to say, and for sure there are going to be some people using ChatGPT in ways that we do not want to necessarily encourage in certain contexts, just as much as there are going to be some people who are going to be paying for a paper online that somebody else has written, but it doesn't seem to be happening at large. But I do think that we are hearing, and a lot of people are asking about, AI, it's raising a lot of ethical problems for schools. I mean, cheating is one thing, but like there's a lot of things to think about here, but I'm scared. What do we do? What do we need to be focused on, Denise?
No, it's a great question. And think back to Victor's primer at the beginning of this. So we're talking about AI, not just ChatGPT and its use in schools. And some of these are old problems that we've seen just with technology in general, and some are potentially new and the jury is still out. So obviously the cheating, particularly the plagiarism that we've been talking about, cyberbullying, which has been around for a long, long time now, right? When you start to use AI, some of the ways to detect sort of the fake or who did it, it's going to be harder, right? You hear a lot about deep fakes. Since you were talking about Taylor Swift, I'll stick with the Taylor Swift examples here, Victor. And, it just came out last week that there's some really not great deep fakes going around about Taylor Swift. Very hard to detect. And also misinformation, who said what. And especially in schools, when these things can fly around very, very quickly without necessarily the adults knowing about it until it's time to do damage control, these are some pretty scary things. The other things to keep in mind would be privacy issues and data security. There's a lot of information being collected now, all in the name of potentially helping students, right? So you can track maybe who didn't turn in their homework the past 3 weeks and automatically generate a note saying, hey, what's going on or whatever. How much of that information being collected is actually secure? How much of it do parents know are being collected? There's a lot of privacy issues and data security issues that come up. Also, I think if you've been reading, you know that there is some intellectual property and copyright issues. We have in the writer's strike that was a big sort of note of contention is who gets credit. We wrote those words originally. You're using our words to train this model, and some kind of mishmash configuration gets spit out. Is that right? Should we get copyright rights there? Who owns those new products that get created, and is it okay to use those products to train your language models? And again, I think I think someone was meeting today in Washington to discuss some of this stuff. The other thing that I think you should be aware of as an adult who has an interest in this topic are all of the sort of algorithmic biases that we find because, as Victor said, it's trained on a lot of old stuff, and a lot of old stuff already has bias in terms of, let's say, gender or social mores, right, and social values built in. But then also there's algorithmic biases just because the nature of the technology isn't there yet. So it may not recognize different skin colors correctly. It may have some side of a kind of a bias when it comes to sort of gender and gender types. And then, of course, there's just the overall equity issues about using AI. You know, in order to use AI and have it be a helper, let's say at home for your homework, you're going to need a device, you're going to need connection, right? And so we see equity issues that abound. And there's a whole new field cropping up that Victor and I have been exploring called techno-moral virtues, right? Because this opens up a bunch of things that, again, some we've been dealing with not well, right, in schools, and now it's coming to be potentially new and even harder to detect.
So what's really encouraging to me is that I know so many colleagues here at Stanford who are working exactly on these topics. And if we had more time, we'd be able to have them come and share some of it. But it's really exciting to be at ground zero for some of the progress there. But I know that you've heard something like this. Well, what was it again that a lot of people are asking?
Yeah, so you know, one of the things we do at Challenge Success, we really center the student experience. We get students talking about these things, and you know, students are saying, well, if AI can write our papers for us, why do we need to learn how to write? Like, what's the purpose of school in the first place? So, what are some of the changes, right? Does AI change what we need to learn in school, Victor? Like, walk us through that.
Okay, I mean, this is, a complicated question. Yes and no are going to have to be the correct answers on this, but I'm going to give one quick example here. Some people have played with ChatGPT and know that it's notoriously bad at mathematics. There are plugins to work around it, but you'll notice here I had asked it an arithmetic problem, and it's very confident in its answer. But if you actually look at the sequence of steps, it gets very mixed up in there. It starts changing what numbers it is talking about. And this is a very easy sort of situation to reproduce. So, you could say that, oh, ChatGPT is really good at doing all these things, but it's going to be really important still that humans are able to spot check and catch these things. So just as much, and I think we've had this, and sometimes we still have this debate with calculators. Do you need to learn math because there's calculators and everyone's going to have a phone in their pocket? It still is really good to know some of your arithmetic and mathematical processes because I punch in the wrong numbers all the time on my phone, and to be able to catch that or to sort of have that sanity check associated with it. So I don't think that we're going to be getting rid of some core content or the need to do that. But we also need to be really careful about knowing that when something can be done quickly and easily and come across confidently, that is not necessarily right when AI is involved. And that's actually a big concern I've got because, we talk a lot about AI here at Stanford and in the Silicon Valley. But, the reality is, and I keep seeing this as I travel to many different places, we need to understand AI better just as a whole. The Allen Institute did a large national survey not too long ago where they were checking on American AI literacy. And this was questions like, what does this device have artificial intelligence in it? Can artificial intelligence do this? Does artificial intelligence do that? And only 16% of adults could pass what would be basic AI literacy tests. So like knowing, for example, my remote control does not have artificial intelligence built into it. And, one of the things that we look to in this country is schools being one key place to make sure that we give comparable and equal footing for students to know what they need to thrive in society and economically. But I have to say, schools are having lot of challenges to face right now. And I am so greatly appreciative to our educators and their administrators who are working really hard. And, if you look at all the curricula and stuff and all the classes, and especially coming out of remote learning from the pandemic, there is no room in the school day. There is no time nor capacity to say, okay, well, guess what? We have AI, so we now need to learn AI on top of everything. And even if we did that, so much has changed just in the last year, just even in the last few months. And so if teachers are going to be up to speed and teaching this, this is going to be a really hard problem because everything is going to keep changing. The rug is going to keep getting pulled out from under them. And so we need to come up with some sort of new approach or new solution. And that's one of the things that I've been really excited that I've had a number of people here at Stanford, including students, especially, who've been so excited to build out curricular resources for teachers that because we are at Stanford, where we have a leading school of education, worldwide reputation, and important findings, plus the same can be said for computer science and artificial intelligence, and we are just right near each other, that we can be in dialogue and start building out, here's a quick lesson or material or some instructional resources that a teacher can use to talk about AI and the newest developments about AI, because a lot of them are crossing through our campus in one way or another. And we also do this by way of co-design. So, we want to make sure, and this is what we know as a school of education, that the best way to make things work for schools and teachers is to really understand and work with their circumstances and needs and give them the things in the forms that are going to be nudging in the really right directions. And so we've been building out and are continuing to build out. And I have this line of students, which is super exciting, who want to be involved in and make a difference within education, although that may or may not be their long-term career trajectory. But we're giving them this whole development internship experience in building out curricular resources and getting to know and work closely with teachers. So this will be one of our endeavors. It's yet another acronym on the Stanford campus, but craft.stanford.edu, and we are continuously adding, and it's been wonderfully supported by the School of Education and the Accelerator for Learning, as well as a number of other units on campus. And then you're doing some stuff also at Challenge Success, right?
Yes, we are. And I should say too, I'm super excited about craft because my curriculum construction students this quarter are actually working with Victor and his team to design some curriculum around AI and AI use. So that's, Victor and I, it's been really fun to partner with Victor in ways that we haven't really done since AI came around. So AI brought us together, Victor, which I'm very excited about. But yes, at Challenge Success, so Victor's got his team working on curriculum and a whole bunch of other stuff, which we're going to talk about in a second. But at Challenge Success, folks have been coming to us and saying, look, first of all, we get that cheating's been a problem for years. Can you help us? And now that AI has come in, can you also help us think about not just classroom-based policies and things that we can do to mitigate that, but also what can we do in terms of school-wide policies? So at Challenge Success, we partner with schools and work on both classroom policies and practices and school-wide policies and practices. And our little sort of trifecta, our theory of change, from the research is that well-being, belonging, and engagement all go together, and that's what really leads to thriving students. So if you look at sort of why kids are cheating in the first place, a lot of times it's not because they are lacking the morals, right? A lot of times they are exhausted. They're doing homework super late at night after lots of a long day of school and extracurricular activities or work or taking care of siblings, etc. Or they really don't understand the purpose behind it, and it kind of looks like busy work, and they'd rather put their time then on things that they don't think is busy work, or they don't feel like they really belong in the first place in that classroom, and they don't have a relationship with peers or the adults in the school or the classroom that would make them feel like they don't want to let those people down, or they want, we wouldn't cheat because we really want to learn from this person. So it turns out when you focus on student well-being, health, sleep, all of that, belonging, where they feel like they can bring their whole selves to class and someone has their back, and engagement, where they see the meaning behind what they're learning and they're excited to do it, cheating goes down. And some of those other issues that we've seen around cyberbullying, et cetera, also go down. So if you're interested in more, I know someone just put the website in the chat, but we'll also have it on the last slide as well.
Denise,
So,
that's a lot of
yep.
stuff, but I think that there's one thing that we keep hearing a lot of that maybe you could surface.
Yes. So I think, and it's happening today in DC right now, right? Folks from Meta and Discord are like on the stands right now. If you read the New York Times this morning, the future of AI is ultimately going to be defined by big tech. Like, what is our role here? Aren't we powerless to these big tech companies? And Victor, you have a very optimistic and positive answer to this.
I think it's well-founded optimism. I mean, we are in such a unique position, both metaphorically and physically. I mean, physically, we are in the Silicon Valley, and a lot of the companies and the employees that they bring on and the new startups are coming out of Stanford. So they are in our classes and they're participating in these conversations and having some of these discussions and these provocations and learning that along with the technologies and the ethics that are associated with it. So on the one hand, we are helping to feed the next generation that is going to be shaping this technology. But what's also really cool position-wise is that, like I said, we have such a phenomenal School of Education, such a phenomenal Department of Computer Science. We have a phenomenal Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. And we've been able to, through the Stanford Accelerator for Learning and at the Graduate School of Education, really bring that all together. And we've launched this initiative where we've had tremendous interest on new seed grants, which are there to create entirely new possibilities, start up new research studies and projects to speak to the moment. And I would not have enough time to talk about as many incredibly cool things that are coming from, first-year students all the way up to senior professor with tons of awards and lots of prizes. But just to name a few, how can we use generative AI to make new lesson plans and ease into the amount of time teachers are having to put into their preparations and thus free them up to engage with students more and sort of address those concerns that you had talked about. I spoke about voice recognition, and so we have some really amazing projects where it's taking audio from classrooms and giving feedback to teachers to let them know, are you creating enough speaking opportunities or asking really productive questions on some of the content in there? We are looking into ways that this can be integrated into medical education or merged with virtual reality to create really realistic, helpful agents and to actually think about what form of conversational partner using what sort of sociolect or dialect is going to be most relatable. Because like I said, a lot of the technology has been built on what happens to already be on the internet, and that doesn't necessarily represent everyone's voices on there. We have whole new imaginings of what English class in the future could look like in partnership with teachers and ways that you could use AI as like a debate partner or an idea generator to help to support writing, but not replace writing. So it's really an amazing time here. And I think that Stanford, because of the platform, because of the capacity, because of the people we have coming through, big tech is going to be very visible, but we are going to be continuously shaping what big tech and what policy makers are doing. I mean, I literally just flew back from DC late last night, and this is, something that our colleagues are continuously doing. So I think that it's not strictly in the hands of big tech. They will be a big player, but Stanford is also a massive player in all of this space too.
I love that. That makes me so happy, Victor. Thank you. So if you want to check out more about craft or challenge success, there's our websites. But I think it is time now for us to turn it over to Nate for some Q&A. It looks like we have quite a few questions too. So
I'll stop sharing then.
Yeah, make sure we can put those in the chat as well. Nate, hi, good to see you.
Back. Thank you both so much for that great presentation. Yes, there are indeed a ton of questions coming in over in Q&A. A lot of them really fascinating. We appreciate all of your insights. This is the particularly good stuff. So I'm going to do my best to group some of the themes because they span lots of different subjects. But I think one that started off as just sort of an interesting, I think, segue from some of the things that you've said is using the example example of when pocket calculators became ubiquitous in classrooms, the contemporary lens of education goals pedagogy affects how people look at these new tools. And I'm wondering, with that comparison in mind, and you've already alluded to this a little bit, you've talked about the potential that AI brings as an educational tool. I'm wondering if you can expand that a little bit more using that sort of specific example as a background.
Certainly. I mean, I think we'll be very limited if we only look at what we've done in the past, just as Dan had said in his introduction, and just try to reproduce that. As we develop new technologies, we come up with new possibilities and whole new things that we haven't necessarily imagined, for positive and negative. And so that means that, we are going to be looking at very powerful things that we can do with artificial intelligence that we had not been able to do prior to that. And that is going to be part of, the educational ecosystem. There will be some persistent challenges that are going to be hard problems that we will hopefully get more purchase on. But should we start to think that there are some things we can soften up on, because that is not something that is going to be the best use of human power, but would actually be great with humans aided by technology? Absolutely. And that's something that we're going to continue to work on modeling and getting the message out there, but also being responsive that what is at the core of this, we want to make sure that the human relationships can still be maintained, and some of the things that we know are really hard problems that really humans need to be involved in are continuing to get that attention. So, just like calculators are here, we still have math class. Are there things that we could explore and broaden? For sure. And are we having work done to push that envelope? Absolutely. Same things can be happening with computing and AI.
I wonder, there's a whole family of questions. That's great. Thank you, Victor. There's a whole family of questions about not so there's the what should we be worried about and try to protect against on the AI side of things, but there's also a set of questions, and particularly from clearly some educators who are joining us online, around how AI in its contemporary form can actually assist teachers and assist instruction, and even assist some of the big three elements that Denise, you were talking about in terms of belonging and engagement. I wondered if you could riff on that a little bit. The way AI is a potential right now, a potential tool to assist teachers and educators in the workplace.
Yeah, I'll speak really quickly and then pass to Denise. So,
Perfect.
I mean, one thing I'm excited about is I do see more movement this year within the tech industry, to be much more attentive to what can we do to help teachers, rather than how can we exclusively only focus on a tutoring platform, which will be a very interesting development. But, teachers are juggling huge amounts of information and needing to produce huge amounts of information. So to streamline that, and to make it so that way less of their time is doing the busy work of, digesting a bunch of information and writing comments that are going to sound fairly repetitive, and being able to have more tools to support that, or to give good recommendations as additional, quote, eyes and ears of what's happening in the classroom, is going to be huge. And it should not be taken as license to say, oh, this is going to just make it so we can increase the number of students teachers are working with. No, it's going to actually let teachers do the work that brought them into the teaching profession again. But I think that being able to cut into a lot of that bureaucratic part of teaching that takes them away, and then help be more useful input or more useful resources, such as, I need a sample written response of this sort, I need a sample assessment like this, is going to be really powerful for them, and also help to give ideas on how to engage with students with whom they're still learning how to best connect with them, and might know, like, maybe Taylor Swift is a middle-aged phenomenon and there's someone more popular, and then AI can maybe help connect some examples to get us started.
Yeah. And I would just add, thank you, Victor. And I think, again, that human component is not going to go away. You still need the human to check on all of these things. So I've heard teachers who, let's just take writing letters of college recommendation. If you're an English teacher or math teacher, and you teach seniors, you may have, 30 to 50 asks a year. And that takes a lot of time. AI can actually really change that by pulling in some of the very concrete things you know about each individual student and individualizing those letters. But you still, as a human, have to read over those letters and make sure it doesn't sound like a robot wrote it, and make sure that there's no hallucinations, which is what's called when AI is making mistakes, right? So there's all sorts of efficiency work that I think teachers are very excited about. In the world of mental health and well-being, there's a lot as well. There's, even just the basic reminders of, have you had enough sleep? Or it's time to turn off the machine and go to bed, right? Kinds of things, all the way to, I was just talking with a company that they happen to track students' emotions on any given day. The student weighs in. They can then, through AI, generate a letter home, basically saying, hey, every Tuesday night, Johnny is feeling really anxious and scared about getting his homework done. What's going on Tuesday nights, right? So there's some really interesting things coming from this.
I will want to add though, Denise, because you mentioned rec letters, and I know that I've heard a lot of teachers have a very strong response because there's something very personal that we want to express, and there's a lot of interpersonal communications that we want to make sure are expressed as humans. But, just for the rec letters I write, gathering up all the materials, getting reminders of, oh, remember this one activity the student had done, or some of these other things. And if those could come up as suggestions to make my writing easier and I can still really very much use my voice, that would be a very nice aid in AI and help me to stay a lot more organized, because I want to make sure I can say what I can, but I spend so much time digging up the old assignments, checking through all these different notes that I'd made, and putting it all together, whereas some of that can come up as information, as a reminder, as I'm in the word processor, for instance.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Actually, staying in that train of thought, and maybe I'll start with Denise. What do you say to people who say, why train teachers at all? This is can't students eventually just have an AI tutor who tells them everything, teaches them everything they need, and personalizes their learning in all the right ways, quote unquote. What do you say to those people?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, if you go back to sort of that trifecta of well-being, belonging, and engagement, and you think back to, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We need to feel safe, and we need to feel secure, and we need to feel in relationship before we are ready for what he called enlightenment, right? Before we're ready to learn. And so, as it gets better, I know that people think that they're in a relationship with an AI. They've been doing this with sort of elderly people to combat loneliness, but there is something about actually having a human, right, who you are working with, who can make those calls and see the limitations of the technology and see a little bit more of how to really bring it to its full potential. It's the aid, right? It's like that old line about, it's not that doctors are going to be replaced, radiologists aren't going to be replaced because of AI. It's that radiologists who don't use AI are going to be replaced by radiologists who do use AI. It's going to make it even better, but you can't lose that human component, both in terms of just literally right now checking, right, that things are done well. In my curriculum class, we can spit into ChatGPT, pull out a curriculum on X, but there is knowledge there, right? There's a critical eye needed to make sure that that is actually right and right for our particular students.
What I'd also add to that is, there's so many people who, and I applaud them, who have changed careers and gone into teaching, and, their jaws just go slack. They're like, this is so hard. This is one of the hardest human activities and tasks. And AI is a great aid that can sort of imitate some of it, but there's so much that we can't even fully articulate well. And so much that I think that just as much we would say, oh, we don't need people to be parents to their kids, or we don't need to hang out with actual friends. There's things that are going to intersect both with values, but also I think that intersects with a complexity of human experience that for generations we know intrinsically the importance and the messiness of it. And while we can have things that will help, that's not going to be the same or even a worthy pursuit to replace. It will just broaden some of those options that are available.
Yeah, it's everything that you both say resonates as somebody who works in education with me, but also just as a parent. I have teenage kids, and the trifecta that Denise talks about and the dynamics you were just outlining, Victor, are things that we want to lean into, the personal connection and all of those kinds of things. And to the extent that those things can be made better by AI in some way because of efficiencies or tools that teachers don't have, that's the very sort of optimistic side and positive side. But as parents, we think about that a lot, and I'm sure people on the call do too. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about higher education. There are a cluster of questions about the impact of AI on college. And there's a lot of conversation nationally about higher education in this country. And I'm just wondering if you have general thoughts about what you're seeing in trends right now. And since this is a Stanford program, I think people are particularly interested in what Stanford students are experiencing and what we're experiencing with them on campus related to AI. And I guess the first part is the sort of more pessimistic part. Do we see negative trends that we're trying to protect against? And then the second part is, what do we see that is showing up today on campus with our college students that gives us excitement and hope?
Those are fantastic questions. And I mean, I think there's a huge conversation to be had about higher education today and right now. And I mean, there's a lot of conversations and I think teaching moments about matters like academic integrity or plagiarism or being comfortable having dialogue with somebody and seeing or taking positions that maybe you're not feeling confident in expressing. And so to the extent that we stay focused on what those challenges are and how we can aid, whether it's sort of virtual conversation partners or seeing how instructive certain cases are and like discussing where is my unique contribution to something and where is the tool, something that we can very much broadly accept as appropriate in there. What I'm seeing with students, and I think some of this is in part because of Stanford's entrepreneurship orientation, is that there's a lot of students who want to try to create something new and, credit to this generation, new that will address longstanding problems in the world that have been kind of passed down to them. They're very concerned about climate. They're very concerned about people feeling included. They're very concerned about matters of equity and opportunity. And so I hear these fantastic ideas and real motivation from students to participate in workshops and classes, in competitions to develop those skills. I do also hear some students are very nervous, or it's like, well, I came here to major in computer science, but if that thing can write the program, do I need to? Well, just as much as I showed that math example, it can put out code. It doesn't mean it's good code. It doesn't mean that it's right code. And coding languages change. And some of our most sophisticated techniques will continue to change. And that's a very human-driven process. So I think there's still going to be great importance being placed on that. At the same time, it's been a year and change. And we've been one of the fastest groups out with some of the high school research, being able to look pre and post. But, with higher education, like there's a lot of questions that we need to examine, and there's a very different set of circumstances. So I would say this is where research, like what we try to encourage here at Stanford and through a school of education that is leading the way on research, is going to be continuing to do the work to find out what is happening beyond what we just do an initial glance online for.
Yeah. And I would say too, it's the same things that you would do at a K-12 school to mitigate cheating that work also at the higher ed level with some caveats. So if the students are completely overwhelmed, if they don't see the purpose in the assignment, if they don't feel relationship with the adult, you're going to see some more academic integrity issues. The way that I do it in my class, and I think we've talked about this as a school of ed as a whole, is I allow ChatGPT use on assignments, but it has to be cited that they used it. They need to tell me sort of where and when they used it, because I do see it as a tool. And I also make assignments that build in that they have to use their own personal experience as part of the evidence behind the claim, which again, it's not going to be, there's ways to get around that. But that is a preventative model. And then I have students who will, in the middle of a discussion in class, plug into ChatGPT to get some discussion points. And I'll just say, well, what do you think about that, right? We know what ChatGPT now says about it, but what do you think about that? So you have to be skilled enough and really understand the student's needs to do it well. But the same we're seeing the same thing happening K-12 at higher ed. The difference is higher ed, you might have 100 students in a lecture hall, right? As opposed to that K-12 teacher who may really know the students and kind of know, hey, this isn't their voice, right? So I think detection is a little bit trickier. Victor and I have talked about that before.
Great. And just one more higher ed question. Is there any impact on the exercise of getting into college? In other words, essays and, all of those kinds of entrance requirements. Do you see any trends there or anything to be paying attention to?
We're really fortunate to have some of the leading scholars on higher education who've been engaging on this particular topic. I think right now, especially this year, there's a lot of new thinking about how to be most effective in the admissions process, and what sorts of inputs to take in. And so, the solutions are yet to be found, but it is very much on everyone's awareness, and there's a real commitment to pursuing responsible solutions on that front. And so, stay tuned. I think that we are going to make headway on that. But for everyone who's been following the news, a lot has been going on. ChatGPT is just one of the things that are in there. I think it comes down to sort of us as parents, caregivers, and educators to also say, look, you as a student, as an individual, as somebody who's going to be participating in society, what do you want to uphold to yourself? What are you trying to accomplish here, and where and how will you model what you envision for your own future and for those who are coming after you, and providing support and encouragement for that to be what they exemplify.
Great. Okay, we're almost at time. Before I turn it back over to Megan here, there's so many good questions. There's no way I can ask all of them. I do want to give a quick shout out to what is clearly there's a bunch of high school students on this participating in this program today, and they are asking great questions, and just happy to have them here. A lot of enthusiasm, also thoughtful questions about impacting their experiences as they live them right now, including an anecdote about what about my class? Everybody's asked. My teachers are requiring everything in shorthand, and we've never had to write so much by hand in our lives. Denise, do you have any quick observation on that before I turn it over to Megan?
Going back to everything in shorthand is not going to be a sustainable solution, and also really hurts the people's wrists. Never mind a whole bunch of folks out there for whom that's not going to work for the different ways that their brains work. So no, that's not the answer. Have them check out Challenge Success. We put on workshops, have their teacher come to a Challenge Success workshop on how to use AI in a way that you don't have to go all the way back to the shorthand.
Perfect. Good. That's a great segue. Check out Challenge Success. I'm going to turn it over to Megan to do the closure and the thank you. But just from our perspective, thank you very much for your time. And Megan, take it away.
Great. Have to say I'm a big cursive writing advocate. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan Sweezy Fogarty. I'm honored to serve as Stanford's Senior Associate VP for Community Engagement and join you to close today's program. So first and foremost, thank you to Victor Lee, Denise Pope, and Dean Dan Schwarz, who are among so many researchers at Stanford who focus on the challenges and opportunities we face together in our region and world. The recording of today's program will be available on the Continuing Studies website, as well as Stanford YouTube, so you can watch for that in the next couple weeks. We also hope you'll stay involved with Stanford. You can learn about events open to the public, many of which are virtual, at events.stanford.edu. And if you live closer to campus, the recent rains have turned the foothills green, and we invite you to enjoy the beauty of the Stanford campus by taking a walk at the Stanford Dish or viewing art on campus and in our free museums. I also encourage you to check out Stanford Athletics. We know women's basketball is exciting, and many winter sports are in full swing. So thank you for participating in Discover Stanford for You. Please let us know your thoughts on today's event when you get the survey. And if we can provide any information, you can reach out to me and Stanford University through community.stanford.edu. Also, at that website, you'll find a list of our favorite Stanford podcasts under the Discover tab, including the Graduate School of Education's Schools In podcast, which features fantastic discussions led by Dean Schwarz and Denise Pope. We look forward to connecting further as we all work towards a better world. Stay in touch and have a wonderful day. Thank you.